we look at the mechanics of a wrist lock.
This is the Kitsune clan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
The channel Open Budo recently had an interesting video about how we can train a certain wrist lock, namely Omote Gyaku from the Bujinkan style. In other styles, this technique is usually known as Kote Gaeshi, and it's performed a bit differently, but the principal idea should be clear. It's a technique in which we grab the hand and twist it in a certain direction in order to control the opponent or move the opponent in a certain direction. And I really liked the ideas the guys on Open Budo were presenting there. Therefore, I thought about contributing some own ideas and referencing to their contributions. While preparing this video, I recognized I have quite something to say about Omote Gyaku, Kote Gaeshi, or however you want to call it, and I will probably be forced to split that into two videos. This is part 1, and I want to talk about the biomechanics of Omote Gyaku first, before I want to talk a bit more about training methodology. If we look at the biomechanics of this very technique, we can recognize that we call it a wrist lock, but in fact it does much more. In detail, we usually grab the hand in one of 4 ways. They are demonstrated here consecutively. These 4 single grips are generally considered to be Omote Gyaku or Kote Gaeshi, but there are varying views on that depending whom you would ask. After gripping the wrist, we usually fold it to the inside. I know in English we can differentiate between bend and flex, but I always mix it up because it makes sense for me with the elbow, but not so much with the wrist. When folding in the hand, we have a 90-degree angle or a bit less towards the forearm, and therefore we can now use the hand to twist the forearm joint. A lot of people think that the wrist does not only flex and bend but also twist, but in fact the twisting is a feature of the forearm. So we can already see this is a wrist lock forearm twist technique. If we check more of the details, we can recognize more things are happening. While folding the wrist and twisting the forearm, we can often see a movement of the fingers. Why? The tendons that move the fingers have a certain length, but they are pretty long along the arm and connected to the muscles in the forearm. If we now fold the wrist, then part of this length has to go around the bent side of the wrist, and therefore less tendon is available for the fingers. This usually results in an opening of the fingers. So if there's a closed fist and we fold the hand to the inside, the fingers will open. This feature can be used for various things, for example, for disarming. Yeah, but I cannot even move the wrist inwards if the opponent is very strong and makes a fist. Funnily, a lot of kata movements are, in my view, especially made to open up the fist in the way that one hand drags at the forearm and the other one strikes against the back fist. By this, folding the hand inwards and breaking the fist open, then also allowing to grasp the wrist and perform wrist locks such as Omote Gyaku. Also, on the other side, there's more to it than just a folding of the hand, so wrist lock and twist of the forearm. As soon as the forearm joint reaches its maximum, that's usually when the 2 bones in the forearm, so ulna and radius, cross over each other, then we somehow have to deal with this. And the normal reaction is a rotation of the shoulder. Therefore, the elbow is swung inwards with a shoulder rotation to compensate for the lack of further mobility of the forearm. By this wrist lock also controls the relative position of the elbow and the shoulder and ultimately brings the opponent out of balance. That's what we want. There's a lot of things that can be said, how to perform that and whatever. For me, one aspect here is I usually try to bring the elbow of the opponent in front of his belly in order to remember this aspect. And here we are hitting training and learning ground. I usually tell students to once hit the opponent with his own elbow. By this, the elbow is in a good position and we can perform the wrist lock nicely. There's a lot of opinions about wrist locks and that they in fact don't work. In my view, this comes down to several aspects that we can observe in combat sports or martial arts in general. One aspect is that a lot of people that try to perform wrist locks don't have the right distance to the opponent. They are too close. Wrist lock only work effectively if I have a certain distance. This may now be counterintuitive to my statement before where I said I tried to hit the opponent once with the elbow. But as you can see with different variants here, this is usually only a short moment and then you drag back the hand of the opponent, by this getting in the right distance to the opponent and having the wrist lock being painful and effective. Concerning the positioning of the hand in 3 dimensions, I usually use the hand as a kind of shield, so I place Omote Gyaku somewhere between me and the opponent, not too far to the sides. There it's really ineffective in the sense of it doesn't protect me and the transition of force onto the wrist is suboptimal. If we think there's not enough effect in this type of technique, then we can further explore the biomechanics of it. We can, for example, instead of grasping the hand directly to perform this wrist lock, instead grasp the fingers. There are, for each of the 4 basic grips that I showed before, 4 variants of possibilities how I can grip the fingers. Usually I either grip the thumb or 2 of the other fingers together, resulting in the 3 possibilities. This is especially interesting if I have a much stronger or much bigger opponent with which I have to deal, because any grip to the fingers will be already really more painful than grabbing the hand, and in combination with then folding the wrist, twisting the forearm, controlling the elbow, controlling the shoulder, and destabilizing the balance of the opponent, I can have control. Another way to increase the pain comes from what I described earlier, that usually if you fold in the wrist, the fingers pop open. If I simply force the fingers shut, the problem of the opponent is that the tendons are simply not long enough to allow the fingers being folded and the wrist folding in. Which means if I have already folded the wrist and then actively fold in the fingers, this will be really, really painful. In the most extreme case, I can grasp the fingers directly, roll them in, press against the nails, and have a very long distance grip and still control the opponent with this painful hold, usually simply forcing the opponent to the ground. These are now just some of the possibilities that we have with Omote Gyaku. As I said, I will have at least one more video, especially concentrating on how to teach this thing, but I think we might even further explore it, for example, with different types of weapons in more videos in the future. This was a shout out to Open Budo and their training ideas. I really like what they are putting forward there, and I hope this is a bit of a support for them. Hope to chat around a bit with some of you in the future and hope to see you around next time.